In 1995, IndyCar racing had big crowds, huge sponsors, growing field sizes, and most of their races on network television. But at this pinnacle moment, it was split in two. Blame for the open-wheel split fell on both sides. IRL management were vilified for their willingness to destroy a shaky but successful system to grab power. CART owners were called an arrogant group of the rich, who drove away the man who controlled their biggest event. Just a few years prior, IndyCar was described as a battle between the naive and the stupid. Now people were forced to choose which one was more appealing. Throughout 1995, both sides made arguments why their series would be better when they went head-to-head in '96.
The IRL's objective of an oval-based series is predicated on the foundation that there are simply too many road and street courses presently offered. Often that leads to a lack of passing, which in turn translates to a lack of excitement for the spectators.
In the last several years, with the growth of NASCAR, people have begun to realize that if you're going to succeed in the United States, if you're going to compete for your television ratings and for your sponsorship, you got to be on ovals. Americans like to see the whole thing.
The IRL planned to end their season every year at the Indy 500, the biggest race and championship decided on one dramatic day, and they promised to pay more money than CART.
In addition to a minimum $1 million purse guaranteed for each event, the IRL will offer the only current $100,000 first-place payoff in Indianapolis car racing for events other than the Indy 500. Each IRL race will be televised live on ABC.
CART was an established product. They had the advantage of having the star drivers and teams that fans were connected to. The IRL promised to put excitement first, and the stars would eventually develop over time.
About 2 years ago, I went to, I think it was one of the CART road racing circuits. And spending all this time on ovals, all of a sudden, I understand why the public loves the oval so much. I mean, everything that was exciting that happened on the corner where I wasn't. And I couldn't see anything. And whereas the oval, you could see it all.
I guess it's just the excitement. You never have time to relax or to settle down. There's always a race going on somewhere, and it's so intense.
We are seeing so many young drivers that race midget and sprint cars and other types of cars that are getting a chance that never would have under the other regime. And I think that's what has to be done, or what is direly needed, and why I'm supporting the Indy Racing League.
Opportunity, cost effectiveness, safety. Repaving a path to stardom. From the grassroots of American open-wheel racing all the way to the Indianapolis 500. That's what the Pep Boys Indy Racing League is all about.
In addition to bigger purses, the IRL would cost far less to participate in. After using the 1995 CART rules for the first year, IRL would run non-turbocharged engines in different cars in 1997. An IRL engine would cost $75,000 and was owned by each team. In CART, teams leased engines for $140,000 each, and they needed to be rebuilt every 500 miles at a cost of $34,000. Leasing several engines, teams would spend around $2 million on engines for the entire season. An IRL chassis would cost roughly $263,000 and would be used for several years. Including parts, a CART chassis cost around $480,000, and a new design came out every year. With less cost to participate and bigger purses being offered, IRL teams could hire drivers based on talent instead of looking for drivers who brought money. Was this a serious plan for long-term sustainability, or just a petty battle for control? Reaction was mixed.
If we cut it by a half, that would be great. If we cut it by a third, that would be good. But I think we can cut it substantially.
I would say that on a per race basis, it's probably not going to be much cheaper than CART. I don't think anybody can accurately say what it's going to take. Let me rephrase that. What it's going to take to win races in IRL.
It isn't trying to help out the little guy, or it's for control of what has the potential of being an enormous business.
So it's not giving.
And the rest of it is so much hooey. I want to have some input into the direction that the sport goes. That is That's paramount. I think this institution has to have some input.
When the IRL put together their series, their biggest problem was a lack of established drivers. All the big names stayed in CART and nobody knew who any of the IRL drivers were. Of those who found IRL rides, John Paul Jr., Arie Luyendyk, and Roberto Guerrero were the only 3 drivers who had ever won a race. Scott Brayton won the pole at Indy in 1995. Eddie Cheever spent 9 years in Formula One. The IRL was open to all teams and drivers. CART teams were encouraged to compete, but no team decided to run both series because of a controversial rule and a resulting boycott. In July 1995, it was announced that the IRL would adopt a provisional system like NASCAR that guaranteed spots in races to the full-time teams.
The new scoring system is designed to provide starting slots at each venue to the top 75% of cars in the league standings. Thus, at Indianapolis, the leading 25 IRL participants would have spots secured in the field. But if and only if they can qualify within a predetermined percentage of that year's pole speed, whatever that might be.
The only thing that's happened is that the people who have come and raced with you all year, the people who have come and invested the money, the sponsors who spent tremendous money on cars can expect that with a good team, with a job well done, with points well earned and properly accumulated, they're going to have a spot at all the races, and not just the Indy 500.
At the Indy 500, 25 teams would be locked into the field, and only 8 other cars that weren't series regulars would make the race. The 25-8 rule was one of the most important landmarks in the creation of the IRL. On the surface, it was done to protect teams that raced in the new series, but at the same time, the IRL could use this rule to force CART teams to run all the races if they wanted to run the Indy 500. If those teams ran the full schedule, George would in effect get the schedule he thought was best and have control over the rules. And with the IRL changing to a new rules package in 1997, CART might die at the end of 1996 because teams would want to run 2 different cars in both series. All teams would race in the series that had the Indy 500. It was a strategy that was possible to work. The IRL was very careful to create its schedule, so there was no conflict with CART, and teams could run both series if they wanted in 1996. At first, the 25-8 rule was unpopular due to the fact that traditionally nothing was guaranteed at Indy. It was an open competition, where everyone had to earn their starting spots. In the years between 1993 and 1995, Bobby Rahal and Team Penske cars missed the race because they were too slow. No matter how much money you had, everyone was equal entering the Indy 500. Critics said the 25-8 rule took that away. But 2 months after the IRL schedule was released, a new CART race in Brazil was added to their schedule that created a conflict with the second IRL race in Phoenix. As CART teams now couldn't run all the IRL races, the 25-8 rule hurt them dearly.
We're being shut out of Indianapolis. We have 26 or 27 drivers here, and 8 of them would have been allowed to run Indianapolis. What would we do with the other 20 guys? Just send them home?
When they started to regulate who can and who can't run in the Super Bowl, it'd be like going to the Dallas Cowboys and saying, hey, you guys can't play this year.
So instead of joining the IRL, CART teams fought back, and did so with strong destruction. On December 18, 1995, CART officially announced their battle plans. Instead of racing at Indy in May, they created the US 500, a 500-mile race at Michigan, a track owned by Roger Penske. Even more shocking, the race would be held at the same time as the Indy 500.
Their race is not political. It isn't between teams or cars or sponsors. Their race has nothing to do with tradition, history, and TV ratings. It isn't decided in headlines or boardrooms. It is a race that only they can create, and it cannot go on without them. It is 500 miles that won't even exist until the first of these men crosses the finish line. For this is a contest between men, the best in their sport, and it is defined by speed, time, and distance, not the place, not the track. It is a race between their fears and their dreams, and that race belongs to no one but them.
The US 500 was designed with the purpose of taking spectators and TV viewers away from the Indy 500, but that wasn't the only way CART fought the IRL. In January, A.J. Foyt filed a lawsuit against CART saying they were pressuring major companies not to sponsor IRL teams, and this cost Foyt's team over $5 million.
Foyt's attorneys say that, for one, Texaco advised the owner that it would not provide sponsorship in 1996 nor associate itself with the IRL. IndyCar released a statement saying only that the suit is baseless and without merit. Attorneys for both sides are to meet April 22nd in Houston. That's Foyt's hometown.
Not only was open-wheel racing split, but now both sides were actively trying to hurt each other. It was only going to get worse from there.
The Magic Kingdom, the home of Mickey Mouse, and an IndyCar race? That's right, the inaugural Indy 200 at Walt Disney World is set to take place Saturday, January 27th on the newly constructed 1-mile tri-oval just inside the main gates of the Magic Kingdom. The 200-mile event will feature a $1 million purse and will be televised live by ABC television.
Well, I think what's going to happen is probably one of the greatest venues and races to come off in the last quarter of a century.
To start the IRL, Tony George and Disney World built a 1-mile oval inside the world's most popular theme park. To hold a race at such a venue was seen as a major success for the new series. The first IRL race was scheduled for January 27th, one day before the Super Bowl. The idea was that when people opened the sports page on Super Bowl Sunday, they would read about the IRL race. The drivers in the event were underdogs, to say the least. Butch Brickell was a stuntman who raced power boats. Stan Wattles was a sports car racer who once worked in a Connecticut school as a teaching aide for kids with learning disabilities. John Paul Jr. returned to full-time racing for the first time since he spent 2.5 years in jail in the late 80s when he wouldn't testify against his drug-smuggling father. Jim Buick was a 55-year-old commercial airline pilot whose last IndyCar race was in 1981. Tony Turco, Rick DeLorto, and Bill Demporo raced in the American IndyCar Series, a short-lived series that raced outdated Indy cars. At Disney, Buick, DeLorto, and Demporo were sent home because mechanical issues kept them from completing their driving tests. In practice for the race, Chilean driver Eliseo Salazar suffered a broken leg in a hard crash.
We're ready for the inaugural event in the Indy Racing League here at Walt Disney World. They began a while ago with the opening ceremonies with that most typical Disney flair.
Before the race at Disney, 400 doves were released into the air. A sold-out crowd of 51,000 fans filled the stands. A ceremonial brick from the Indianapolis Motor Speedway was placed at the track. Donald Trump walked around pit road and was presented in newspapers as evidence that celebrities liked the new series.
Oh, it's really beautiful, really great.
Roy E. Disney. Lady and gentlemen, start your engines.
The dream is real. The green flag is out from Wayne Sweeney, and Buddy Lazier jumps into the lead.
The race was won by Buzz Calkins. Before that, Buzz had only 2 podiums in 3 years in Indy Lights. The next IRL race was 2 months later in Phoenix, won easily by Arie Luyendyk. Buddy Lazier was hospitalized in intensive care after breaking his pelvis and a vertebrae in a practice crash. If the IRL was a series meant to provide young sprint car drivers with big opportunities, the embodiment was Tony Stewart. In 1995, the 24-year-old was the first to win 3 USAC championships in 1 year. In the first 2 IRL races, Stewart proved sprint car drivers could easily adapt to driving Indy cars, and he led both races. Driving for Team Menard, he promised to be a threat to win the Indy 500. Undoubtedly, he never would have gotten a ride in CART.
I got where I'm at through hard work and determination, and there's just as many guys out here with determination as there are, with talent. So they just need to keep plugging and keep getting on the phone and calling these guys, because I think we're going to open up their eyes to some midget sprint car guys. I think it'll work. You just got to keep after it.
When May rolled around, the Indy 500 attracted even more interesting drivers. Bronco Brad Murphy was an Arizona rodeo cowboy who hadn't driven a race car in 7 years. 00 Joe Gosick was one of the best super-modified drivers in the Northeast. 24-year-old Rayson Gardner was the youngest driver to go over 500 miles per hour at Bonneville. He spent 2 years in the American IndyCar series. Scott Harrington drove in one kart race back in 1989. To get in the Indy 500, Harrington gave up everything he owned.
Rookie Scott Harrington has spent every available penny to finance his team. He sold his vintage 77 Porsche along with fiancée Tracy's Mustang. Over the past 3 weeks, they've maxed their credit cards, received an eviction notice, and had the power shut off in their apartments.
Harrington drove to the track each day in a borrowed 1987 Ford Tempo. Newspapers told the story of a local racing fan who sent him $2,000 to support his team. The oldest car in the field was a 1991 Lola, entered by Loophole Racing. It was the same car that Danny Sullivan finished 10th with in the 1991 Indy 500. It had since raced in the American IndyCar series, then was converted to compete in the Pikes Peak Hill Climb. USAC midget racer Dan Drinan was the driver, mechanic, and engineer for Loophole. In the 80s, he worked as a mechanic on the teams of Mario and Michael Andretti. In 1992, he barely survived a terrible midget wreck.
The car that took the wildest ride was USAC midget points leader Dan Drinan.
And then there was Team Scandia, owned by Andy Evans, the Wall Street investment manager for Bill Gates. As a driver, he won the 12 Hours of Sebring in 1995 and 97. In 1996, he bought IMSA, Sebring International Raceway, and Mosport. Scandia entered a record 7 cars in the Indy 500, and all of them qualified. Along with Tony Stewart came a flood of USAC racers. A whopping 34 drivers attended USAC's rookie meeting at the start of the month. Even drivers who didn't have rides, like Kenny Irwin, Doug Kalitta, and Jack Hewitt were there. The car that Roberto Guerrero won the pole with in 1992 was rented by Tony George for rookies to take the rookie test in, so they could at least pass the test before they found a ride for the race. Indy was freshly repaved over the winter, and the new asphalt meant speeds would be at an all-time high, and people at home got to see every bit of the chaos. For the first time in Indy 500 history, every day of practice was televised. ESPN2 had 3 hours of live practice coverage every day. And amid all this, people were more unhappy than ever. For the first time, the best drivers and teams were skipping the Indy 500. With a serious chance that the US 500 might grow into a better race, the Indy 500 might never again be as big as it once was. Robin Miller of the Indianapolis Star was vocal in his belief that track management was destroying everything that made the Indy 500 great. Open competition, the best competitors. Indianapolis area Target stores briefly refused to carry Indy 500 merchandise in support of CART. In the lead-up, even retired drivers were taking sides. Mario Andretti called the IRL a, quote, travesty to the sport.
To have a totally oval series, you almost have to go back to the 50s. Why do we want to go back to the 50s? Times have changed, guys.
Mario even said he would come out of retirement to run the US 500 if it wouldn't distract from Michael Andretti's championship hopes. 54-year-old Gary Bettenhausen entered the US 500 in a team owned by his brother Tony. AJ Foyt offered to enter 56-year-old Al Unser Sr. in the Indy 500. Big Al turned down the offer after a few days' deliberation. Foyt himself didn't think he could lose enough weight to fit in an Indy car, or he too would be in the race. 59-year-old Gordon Johncock was looking for a ride at Indy as well. With friends turned into enemies, institutions torn apart, and race cars at the fastest in their history, the month of May in 1996 was unlike anything seen before or since.